My daughter called me the failure of the family after I opened a bakery. My son-in-law mocked me at his bowling club, saying I was wasting time making pastries no one likes. But when I got the chance to cater a billionaire's wedding, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Chapter 1: The Dream That Became a Nightmare. I never thought my own daughter would be the one to crush my dreams. At 62, I thought I'd earned the right to chase what made me happy. I was wrong. The morning I opened Beulah's Sweet Corner, my hands trembled as I hung the hand-painted sign on the door. After 35 years as a school secretary, I'd finally saved enough to rent this tiny storefront on Maple Street. The space wasn't much, just 400 square feet with a display case I'd bought secondhand and 2 small tables, but it was mine. I'd been baking since I was 12, learning at my grandmother's elbow. Even during my marriage to Robert, even after Marin was born, I'd always dreamed of having my own place. Robert used to say it was a silly hobby, that I should focus on real responsibilities. After he passed 5 years ago, I thought maybe it was finally my time. I was arranging my first batch of lemon bars in the display case when the bell chimed. My heart jumped with excitement until I saw who walked in. Marin stood in the doorway, her designer heels clicking against my freshly mopped floor. Behind her was Marcus, her husband of 8 years, looking around like he'd stepped into something dirty. "Mom," Marin said, not bothering with a greeting. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on my apron, trying to keep the smile on my face. "Honey, I'm so glad you came for opening day. I made those chocolate chip cookies you used to love." "Stop." Her voice cut through me like ice. "Just stop with this whole charade." Marcus crossed his arms, shaking his head. "Beulah, this is embarrassing. A woman your age playing bakery? It's not cute." The words hit me in the chest, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not playing anything, Marcus. This is my business." Marin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Business? Mom, look around. This place is pathetic. The whole family is talking about it." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're making a fool of yourself. And worse, you're making a fool of us." Marin's eyes were cold, distant. "Do you know what people are saying? That Robert's widow has lost her mind. That you're having some kind of breakdown." My throat tightened. "I'm not having a breakdown. I'm following a dream I've had for 50 years. Marcus snorted. "Dreams are for young people, Beulah. You're 62. This is just sad." I felt something crack inside my chest. These were the people who were supposed to love me, support me. Instead, they were standing in my dream and telling me it was worthless. "I think you both should leave," I whispered. Marin stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper. "Listen to me carefully, Mom. This little fantasy of yours ends now. You're the family failure, and everyone can see it. Close this place down before you embarrass yourself further." The family failure. The words echoed in my head as they walked out, leaving me alone with the smell of fresh cookies and the sound of my own heartbeat. I stood there for 20 minutes staring at the door, waiting for someone, anyone, to come in. A customer, a neighbor, someone who might tell me I wasn't crazy for wanting this, but no one came. As the afternoon dragged on, I sold exactly 3 items: a coffee cake to Mrs. Henderson from down the street, 2 muffins to a teenager who seemed more interested in his phone than my baking, and a single cookie to a man who paid without even looking at me. By closing time, my feet ached, my back hurt, and my heart felt like it had been put through a meat grinder. I locked the door and sat at one of my little tables, surrounded by unsold pastries. The words kept replaying in my mind. Family failure. Embarrassing. Pathetic. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was deluding myself, thinking I could start over at my age. Maybe this whole thing was just the desperate act of a lonely widow who didn't know what to do with herself. I picked up one of my lemon bars and took a bite. It was perfect. Tangy, sweet, with just the right amount of crumb. My grandmother's recipe, perfected over decades of practice. But what did it matter if no one wanted it? The silence of the empty shop pressed down on me like a weight. Tomorrow I'd have to face this again. The empty tables, the full display case, the knowledge that my own daughter thought I was a failure. I gathered my things and headed for the door, turning off the lights one by one. As I stepped outside, I caught my reflection in the window. A tired woman with gray hair and flour-stained clothes, standing in front of a shop that felt more like a tomb than a dream. But something deep inside me, some stubborn part that had survived 35 years of other people's expectations, whispered that tomorrow might be different. I just didn't know how different it would be. Chapter 2. The opportunity that changed everything. 2 weeks had passed since opening day, and I was barely scraping by. Some days I sold nothing at all. I'd started making smaller batches to avoid throwing away so much food, but even that felt like giving up. I was frosting a batch of cupcakes when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional. "Is this Beulah's Sweet Corner? This is Catherine Mills from Mills Event Planning. I have an unusual request." My heart skipped. A real customer. "Yes, this is Beulah. How can I help you? We have a client getting married this Saturday. The original caterer had a kitchen fire, and we're desperate. The wedding is for 200 guests, and we need desserts. Can you handle something that size on short notice?" Saturday, that was 4 days away. 200 people. My biggest order so far had been 6 cupcakes for a child's birthday party. "What kind of desserts are you looking for?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "An elegant dessert table. The bride wants variety. Individual cakes, pastries, something special. Money is no object. The groom's family has significant means." My hands were shaking as I grabbed a pen. "I can do that." "Excellent. The venue is Blackwell Estate. Be there Saturday at 2 o'clock for setup. I'll email you the details." After I hung up, I stood in my empty shop, staring at the phone. Blackwell Estate. I'd driven past those gates 100 times, the kind of place where hedge funds managers and tech billionaires held their parties. The next 4 days were a blur. I barely slept, barely ate. I spent every waking hour in that kitchen, creating things I'd only dreamed about making. Miniature wedding cakes with delicate sugar flowers, French macarons in soft pastels, chocolate tarts that looked like tiny works of art. My grandmother's lemon bars, elevated with candied lemon peel and gold leaf. I maxed out my credit card buying the finest ingredients. Real vanilla beans, Belgian chocolate, organic butter. If this was my one chance to prove myself, I wasn't going to hold back. Saturday morning, I loaded my old Honda with carefully packed boxes of desserts. My hands were steady now. I'd moved beyond nervousness into something else, a focused determination I hadn't felt in years. Blackwell Estate was even more impressive up close. The mansion sat on manicured grounds that seemed to stretch forever. Servers in crisp uniforms moved efficiently across the terrace where the reception would be held. I spent 2 hours arranging my dessert table, making sure everything was perfect. The late afternoon sun caught the gold leaf on my lemon bars, making them shimmer. The macarons were lined up like colorful jewels. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine. Exceptional work. I turned to find a man in his late 60s watching me. He was tall, silver-haired, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit probably cost more than I made in 6 months, but his smile was warm. "You're the baker who saved our wedding," he continued. "I'm Harrison Blackwell. This is my son's wedding." "Beulah Morris," I said, wiping my hands nervously on my apron. "I hope everything meets your expectations." He picked up one of my miniature cakes, examining it closely. "May I?" "Of course." He took a bite, and I held my breath. His eyes widened slightly. Then he smiled. "This is remarkable. Where did you train?" "My grandmother's kitchen," I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "I don't have formal training. Sometimes the best education doesn't come from schools," he said quietly. He tried one of my lemon bars next, and I watched his expression change. "These are extraordinary. There's something special about them. They're my grandmother's recipe. I've been making them for 50 years. "And you have your own bakery?" "A small place on Maple Street. Beulah's Sweet Corner." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'll have to visit sometime." The reception began, and I watched from the kitchen as guests discovered my desserts. I heard gasps of delight, saw people going back for seconds and thirds. Several guests asked servers who had made the desserts. For the first time since opening my shop, I felt proud. Not just satisfied, but genuinely proud of what I'd created. As the evening wound down, Harrison found me again as I was packing up my empty platters. "The desserts were the highlight of the evening," he said. "I've been to hundreds of events, and I've never seen guests so enthusiastic about the food." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. That means more than you know." He handed me an envelope. Your payment, plus a bonus for exceptional service. I tucked it into my purse without looking. I should get these cleaned up and head home. Beulah, he said, and something in his voice made me look up. Would you have coffee with me sometime? I'd like to hear more about your bakery. My heart did something strange in my chest. Was he asking me on a date? At my age? Yes, I'd like that. He pulled out a business card and wrote his personal number on the back. I'll call you. Driving home, I couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe Marin was wrong. Maybe I wasn't a failure. Maybe I was just getting started. When I finally looked at the envelope Harrison had given me, I nearly drove off the road. The check was for 3 times what I'd expected, with a note. Thank you for reminding me that the best things in life are made with love. I sat in my car outside my little shop, looking at the dark windows. Tomorrow, I'd open those doors again. But something had changed. I wasn't the same woman who'd been crushed by her daughter's words 2 weeks ago. I was someone who had just created magic for 200 people, and apparently, I'd caught the attention of one very special man in the process. The question was, what would happen next? Chapter 3. A romance blooms, a daughter seethes. Harrison called on Tuesday, just as I was closing up the shop. His voice on the phone made my stomach flutter in a way I hadn't felt since I was a teenager. I've been thinking about those lemon bars for 3 days, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Would Thursday evening work for that coffee? There's a quiet place downtown, Cafe Luna. I knew Cafe Luna. It was the kind of place Marin took her book club friends. Elegant, expensive, not somewhere a small-town baker usually went. I'd like that very much. Thursday evening, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear. Everything seemed too casual or too fancy. Finally, I chose a simple navy dress that Robert had always liked, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings. Harrison was already waiting when I arrived, standing as I approached the table. That old-fashioned courtesy made my heart skip. You look lovely, he said, pulling out my chair. Thank you. This place is beautiful. I thought you might enjoy it. I come here sometimes when I need to think. Over coffee and pastries that couldn't hold a candle to what I made in my own kitchen, Harrison told me about his life. He'd been widowed for 8 years, had built his investment company from nothing, and spent most of his time these days traveling between his various properties. It sounds lonely, I said without thinking, then blushed. I'm sorry, I didn't mean— No, you're right. It is lonely. His eyes met mine. What about you? Do you get lonely in that little shop of yours? I thought about the empty tables, the quiet afternoons, the way my heart sank every time the door stayed closed for hours. Sometimes, but when I'm baking, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. That's a rare gift, knowing your purpose. We talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. He asked about my grandmother's recipes, about my dreams for the bakery, about the books I loved to read. I found myself laughing more than I had in months. As he walked me to my car, he said, "Would you have dinner with me Saturday? There's a restaurant I think you'd enjoy. I'd love to." The next morning, I was humming as I arranged fresh scones in the display case when Marin stormed through my door like a hurricane. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her face flushed with anger. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. I'm working." "Don't play dumb with me, Mom. Patricia Hendricks saw you at Cafe Luna last night, with a man." My hands stilled on the scones. Patricia Hendricks was the biggest gossip in Marin's social circle. Of course she'd seen us. "I had coffee with a friend." "A friend?" Marin's voice rose. "Mom, you can't be serious. You're 62 years old. This is humiliating." The familiar sting of her words hit me, but this time I felt something else alongside the hurt. Anger. Humiliating to whom? To you? Yes, to me. To our whole family. First this ridiculous bakery. Now you're chasing after men like some desperate— Stop. My voice was sharper than I'd ever used with her. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Marin blinked, clearly not expecting me to fight back. Mom, you're making a fool of yourself. Again. The man I had coffee with is Harrison Blackwell. He hired me for his son's wedding last weekend. Something flickered across Marin's face. Blackwell? As in Blackwell Investments? Yes. I watched the wheels turning in her head. The Blackwell name carried weight in our town. Serious money, serious influence. What does he want with you? She asked, her tone changing from anger to suspicion. Maybe he enjoys my company. Mom, men like that don't date women like you. He's using you for something. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Women like me. As if I were some pathetic creature unworthy of affection. I think you should leave, I said quietly. I'm trying to protect you. Can't you see that? You're going to get hurt, and then you'll come crying to me when he breaks your heart. Get out, Maren. She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her purse. Fine, but don't come running to me when this all falls apart. You've made your choice. After she left, I sat at one of my small tables, my hands shaking. Her words echoed in my head. Women like you, desperate, making a fool of yourself. But then I remembered how Harrison's eyes had lit up when I talked about my baking, how he'd listened to every word like it mattered, how he'd made me feel interesting, valuable, worth his time. Saturday evening arrived, and Harrison took me to a small Italian restaurant I'd never heard of. The owner greeted him by name and led us to a quiet corner table. This place doesn't look like much, Harrison said, but the food is incredible. The owner used to cook for my late wife and me on special occasions. Throughout dinner, he asked about my week, my plans for the bakery, my thoughts on everything from books to music. He told me about his travels, his business, but more importantly, about the loneliness he'd carried since his wife died. Margaret would have loved you, he said as we shared tiramisu. She always said the most interesting people were the ones who created things with their hands. My cheeks warmed. I'd like to think so. Would you like to see the gardens at my house sometime? Margaret designed them. They're at their peak right now. I'd love that. As he drove me home, I felt lighter than I had in years. This kind, intelligent man was interested in me. Not my money, not my connections. I had neither. Just me. But as we pulled into my driveway, I saw Marcus's truck parked across the street. My stomach sank. Is everything all right? Harrison asked, noticing my expression. My son-in-law. He's probably here on my daughter's behalf. Harrison's jaw tightened. Would you like me to stay? No, but thank you. I can handle this. He squeezed my hand. Call me if you need anything at all. Marcus appeared the moment Harrison's car disappeared around the corner. Having fun playing house with rich old men? He said, not bothering with pleasantries. What do you want, Marcus? To talk some sense into you before you make an even bigger fool of yourself. He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me. Maren told me about your little boyfriend. You think we're stupid? You think we don't know what's really going on here? I have no idea what you're talking about. He's slumming, Beulah. Rich guys like that, they don't settle down with broke bakery owners. They use women like you for entertainment, then move on to someone their own speed. His words hit like physical blows, but I kept my face neutral. When he's done with you, you'll still be stuck with this failing business and no dignity left. Is that really what you want? I want you to leave my property. I'm trying to help you here. Close the bakery. Stop embarrassing the family. Before it's too late, I looked at this man who had married my daughter, who had never shown me an ounce of respect, who was standing on my property telling me how to live my life. Get out, I said firmly, and don't come back. As I watched him drive away, I felt the familiar doubt creeping in. What if they were right? What if Harrison was just amusing himself with the simple baker? What if I was setting myself up for heartbreak? But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me across the dinner table. The gentleness in his voice when he talked about his wife, the way he'd asked about my dreams like they mattered. Tomorrow I would see him again, and despite everything my daughter and her husband had said, I was going to let myself hope. Chapter 4. The business proposal and family sabotage. Harrison's garden was a masterpiece. Roses climbed trellises in perfect spirals, and lavender-lined stone pathways that wound between beds of flowers I couldn't even name. We walked slowly in the late afternoon sun, his hand occasionally touching my elbow to guide me along the path. Margaret spent 15 years creating this, he said, stopping beside a fountain surrounded by white peonies. She said gardens were like relationships. They required patience, attention, and faith that something beautiful would grow. I touched one of the peony blooms, soft as silk. She sounds wonderful. She was. But she's been gone 8 years now, and I think she'd want me to be happy. He turned to face me. Beulah, I need to tell you something. My heart jumped. Was this where he'd tell me Marcus was right? That this had all been some kind of entertainment? I've been thinking about your bakery, about your talent. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. What would you say if I told you I'd like to invest in your business? I'd say, I don't understand. He smiled. I've spent 40 years building companies, recognizing potential. What you have is rare, genuine talent combined with authentic passion. Your desserts at the wedding weren't just food, they were art. We sat on a stone bench beside the fountain. The sound of water trickling was soothing, but my heart was racing. I'm proposing a partnership, he continued. I provide the capital to expand. You provide the creativity and expertise. We could start with 3 or 4 locations, build a real brand. Beulah's could become a household name. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. Harrison, I appreciate the offer, but I don't know anything about running multiple businesses. I can barely manage one little shop. That's what managers are for. Your job would be what you love, creating recipes, maintaining quality, being the heart of the brand. He took my hand. Think about it. You could reach thousands of people with your baking instead of dozens. The possibility was intoxicating. Multiple locations, real success, proving to Marin and Marcus that I was more than they ever imagined. Why would you do this for me? Because I believe in you, and because... He hesitated. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I want to see you succeed. The words hung in the garden air like something fragile and precious. I felt tears sting my eyes. I'm falling in love with you too, I whispered. He leaned over and kissed me then, gentle and sweet, and I felt like a young woman again. That evening, I floated through my house, making tea and trying to process everything that had happened. Harrison loved me. He wanted to invest in my business. He saw potential in me that I'd never dared to see in myself. I was still smiling when my phone rang. Marin's name on the caller ID made my stomach tighten. Mom, we need to talk. I'm coming over. Marin, it's almost 9 o'clock. I'll be there in 10 minutes. She hung up before I could protest. 20 minutes later, she was at my door with Marcus behind her, both of them looking grim. We know about the business deal, Marin said without preamble, pushing past me into my living room. What business deal? Don't lie to us, Mom. Patricia Hendricks saw you at his house today. She heard you talking about investing in partnerships. My heart sank. Of course, Patricia had been there. She probably did landscaping for half the wealthy families in town. Harrison made me an offer, yes. And you're actually considering it? Marcus snorted. Beulah, this is exactly what we warned you about. He's playing you. How is offering to invest in my business playing me? Marin sat down heavily on my couch. Because men like Harrison Blackwell don't make business deals with women like you unless there's something in it for them. What did he ask for in return? Nothing. He believes in my talent. Your talent? Marin's voice rose. Mom, you bake cookies. That's not talent. That's a hobby. The familiar sting of her dismissal hit me, but this time I fought back. My cookies earned enough to pay for that wedding reception that everyone's still talking about. My talent is what caught Harrison's attention in the first place. Wake up, Marcus slammed his hand on my coffee table. Rich men don't fall in love with 62-year-old bakers. They use them, then throw them away. Marin leaned forward, her voice dropping to something almost gentle. Mom, I know you're lonely. I know you miss Dad. But this fantasy you're living, it's going to destroy you. What if it's not a fantasy? What if someone actually sees value in me? Because we know you, Marin exploded. We know who you really are. You're not some successful businesswoman. You're a widow who can't accept that her time is over. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt myself shrinking back into the woman who had been crushed on opening day. And there's something else, Marin continued, her voice turning cold. Something you need to know about your precious Harrison. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through it with practiced efficiency. I did some research. Harrison Blackwell has a pattern. 3 times in the past 10 years, he's gotten involved with older women who owned small businesses. Each time he invested money, made promises, and then took over their companies completely. She showed me the screen. Articles about business acquisitions, legal disputes, women who'd lost everything. He targets lonely widows with small businesses, Marcus added, gets them to sign partnership agreements that gradually give him more control until they own nothing. My vision blurred. The articles looked real, the women's stories heartbreakingly familiar. Was I really just another Mark? One woman lost her family's century-old vineyard, Marin continued. Another lost a boutique hotel that had been in her family for 3 generations. They all thought he loved them too. I stared at the phone screen, my hands shaking. These could be about anyone. Mom, look at the names. Look at the dates. This is his pattern. The evidence seemed overwhelming. My fairy tale romance suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Had I really been so desperate for love that I'd fallen for an elaborate con? We're trying to protect you, Marin said, her voice softer now. We don't want to see you get hurt. I looked at my daughter, at the concern in her eyes, and felt everything I'd built over the past few weeks crumble. What do you think I should do? End it, Marcus said immediately. Before you sign anything, before he gets his hooks in any deeper. And close the bakery, Marin added. Use what you have left to retire properly. Stop trying to be something you're not. I sat there in my living room, surrounded by the doubt they'd planted, feeling smaller and more foolish by the minute. Had Harrison really been playing me? Had I been so starved for attention that I'd ignored obvious warning signs? I need time to think, I said finally. Don't take too long, Marcus said as they prepared to leave. Men like that, they move fast once they've got their target hooked. After they left, I sat in my quiet house, staring at the business card Harrison had given me weeks ago, his personal number, written in his careful handwriting. Was the man who had kissed me in his garden, who had told me he was falling in love with me, really just a predator? Were all those moments of connection, of feeling valued and desired, just part of an elaborate manipulation? I picked up my phone 3 times to call him and put it down 3 times. What would I say? That my daughter had evidence he was a fraud? That I couldn't trust my own judgment? Outside my window, the street was quiet and dark, just like my future suddenly seemed to be. Tomorrow, I would have to decide, trust my heart or trust my family's warnings. Either way, I was terrified I'd be making the biggest mistake of my life. Chapter 5. The Truth Unveiled. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those articles Marin had shown me, heard Marcus's words about predatory men who targeted lonely widows. By morning, I felt hollow and confused. Harrison called at 9 o'clock, just as I was mechanically arranging day-old pastries in my display case. Good morning, beautiful. His warm voice came through the phone. I was hoping we could have lunch today. There are some details about the expansion I'd like to discuss with you. My throat tightened. Was this how it started with the other women? Business discussions that gradually stripped away their control? Harrison, I need some time to think about your offer. Silence. Then, of course, these are big decisions. Would you like to talk about your concerns? I just need to be sure I'm making the right choice. I understand completely. Take all the time you need. But Beulah, I hope you know that my feelings for you aren't contingent on any business arrangement. After I hung up, I stared at my phone, more confused than ever. He sounded sincere. But then again, wouldn't a practiced con man sound exactly like that? I was lost in thought when the bell chimed. A woman in her 50s entered, looking around my small shop with obvious disappointment. Are you Beulah? Yes. Can I help you? I'm Sandra Mitchell. I think we need to talk. The name meant nothing to me, but something in her tone made my stomach clench. I understand you're involved with Harrison Blackwell. My hands went cold. Who's asking? She sat down at one of my small tables without invitation. Someone who made the same mistake you're about to make. This was it. This was one of the women from Marin's articles come to warn me in person. I sat across from her, bracing myself for the truth about Harrison's pattern of deception. I owned a catering company in Denver, Sandra began. 23 years I built it up from nothing. Then Harrison came along, charming and sophisticated, talking about expansion and partnerships. My heart sank. What happened? He swept me off my feet, made me feel special, valued, said he saw potential in me that no one else had recognized. She laughed bitterly. Sound familiar? I nodded. unable to speak. Within 6 months, I'd signed partnership agreements that gave him controlling interest in my company. Within a year, I was pushed out entirely. He kept the name, the recipes, everything I'd built, and gave me a settlement that was barely enough to start over. "I'm sorry," I whispered. She leaned forward. "But that's not why I'm here." I looked up, confused. "I'm here because someone paid me $5,000 to tell you that story." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Your daughter contacted me last week, said she was worried about you making a terrible mistake, offered to pay me to come here and convince you that Harrison was a predator." My mind reeled. But the articles, the other women. I don't know anything about other women. I know Harrison Blackwell ruined my business, but not through romance. Through a legitimate acquisition that I agreed to because I was in financial trouble. She pulled out an envelope from her purse. "Your daughter gave me half up front, promised the rest after I talked to you." I stared at the envelope, my hands shaking. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to have family members who think they know what's best for you." She stood up. "Maybe Harrison is a con man. Maybe he isn't. But you should make that decision based on facts, not manufactured evidence." After she left, I sat in my empty shop, trying to process what I'd just learned. Marin had paid someone to lie to me, had fabricated evidence to break up my relationship. My phone rang. Marin's number. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation last night. I know it was hard to hear, but I just had a visitor," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Sandra Mitchell." Silence. Then, "I don't know what you're talking about." "She told me about the money, Marin, about the $5,000. A longer silence. When Marin spoke again, her voice was different, harder. "Fine. Yes, I paid her, but only because you wouldn't listen to reason. You lied to me. You manufactured evidence to manipulate me. I protected you. Mom, you're so desperate for attention that you can't see what's right in front of your face." "What's in front of my face, Marin? A successful man who's interested in me? Someone who sees value in my work? You're deluding yourself. Men like Harrison Blackwell don't want women like you." There it was again. Women like you. As if I were some inferior species unworthy of love or success. "Why, Marin? Why do you need me to be a failure so badly?" "Because," her voice cracked, "because if you succeed, if you actually build something significant, then what does that say about me?" The truth hung between us like a live wire. "Marcus and I are drowning, Mom. We're $50,000 in debt. His business is failing, and I haven't been able to find work in 2 years. We hoped that when you got tired of playing bakery, you'd sell the house and help us." My breath caught. "So this has nothing to do with protecting me. We need you to be the practical, sensible mother who takes care of her family. We can't afford for you to be successful on your own." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They needed me to fail so they could use me. "Get out," I said quietly. "Mom, get out of my life, Marin. Both of you." I hung up and immediately called Harrison. "I'm sorry I doubted you," I said when he answered. "Can we meet? I have some things to tell you." An hour later, we sat in his garden again, and I told him everything. About Marin's lies, about Sandra Mitchell, about the financial desperation that had driven my daughter to sabotage my happiness. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "I'm so sorry," he said when I finished. "No one should have to choose between family and their own well-being. I feel like such a fool." "You're not a fool. You're a woman who wanted to believe the best about people she loved." He took my hands. "The question now is, what do you want to do about my offer?" I looked into his kind eyes, thinking about everything that had brought me to this moment. The dream that had sustained me through a loveless marriage, the courage it had taken to open my shop, the joy I felt when I created something beautiful with my own hands. "I want to build something extraordinary," I said. "With you." He smiled and pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Then let's start planning." As we spread the papers across his garden table, lease agreements for potential locations, marketing concepts, financial projections, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not just hope, but certainty. I was done being small, done accepting other people's limitations on my life, done letting fear masquerade as love. Marin had made her choice. Now I was making mine. But as we worked late into the evening, planning the future I'd never dared to dream, I couldn't shake the feeling that my daughter wouldn't give up easily. People that desperate rarely did. The war for my life was just beginning. Chapter 6. Sweet Victory. 1 year later, I stood in the flagship location of Beulah's Sweet Corner in downtown Charleston, watching the morning rush of customers line up for our signature lemon bars and artisanal coffee. The space was 3 times larger than my original shop, with exposed brick walls, crystal chandeliers, and display cases filled with confections that looked like jewelry. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the construction crew putting finishing touches on our 4th location across the street. By next month, we'd have 7 Beulah's Sweet Corner locations across 3 states, with plans for a dozen more by year's end. The wedding cake consultation is here, my assistant manager informed me, gesturing toward a young couple waiting nervously by the specialty cake display. I smiled, smoothing my tailored jacket. These consultations were still my favorite part of the business, helping couples create something perfect for their special day. Just like Harrison had done for me, though I hadn't known it at the time. After the consultation, I drove to the house Harrison and I now shared, a beautiful colonial on 5 acres outside the city. We'd married 6 months ago in a small ceremony in his garden, surrounded by flowers and the few friends who truly mattered. No family from my side had attended. I found Harrison in his study, reading over acquisition reports for a tech startup he was considering. At 69, he showed no signs of slowing down, though he'd handed over day-to-day operations of his investment firm to focus on what he called passion projects, like my bakery empire. "How was the consultation?" he asked, pulling me down onto his lap. "Perfect. A spring wedding, 200 guests. They want the full Beulah's experience, which will probably cost more than my first car." I laughed. "Your first car was a BMW, Harrison. That's not exactly a fair comparison." These quiet moments together still amazed me. A year ago, I'd been standing alone in an empty shop, wondering if my own daughter was right about me being a failure. Now I was building something that would outlast us both. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. My old hometown. "Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Can we please talk? Marin." I showed the message to Harrison, who frowned. "She's been trying to reach you for months." "I know. What do you want to do?" I stared at the message, remembering the daughter who used to help me bake cookies when she was small, who used to tell me I made the best birthday cakes in the world. That little girl had grown into a woman who saw my success as a threat to her own survival. I typed back, "I wish you well, but we have nothing to discuss." Then I blocked the number. Harrison squeezed my hand. That couldn't have been easy. It was easier than I expected. She made her choice when she tried to destroy my happiness. I'm making mine now. That evening, we attended the grand opening of Beulah's Sweet Corner location number 5. The mayor was there, along with food critics from 3 major newspapers and a photographer from Southern Living magazine. As I cut the ribbon, cameras flashed, and a crowd of customers applauded. "Mrs. Blackwell," called out a reporter. "What's next for the Beulah's brand?" "Expansion into the Northeast, and we're exploring international opportunities. But more importantly, we're launching our scholarship program for young bakers who want to turn their passion into a profession." Later, as Harrison and I drove home through the quiet streets, I reflected on how dramatically life could change. 18 months ago, I'd been a lonely widow trying to prove she had value. Tonight, I was a successful businesswoman with a loving husband and a future full of possibilities. "Any regrets?" Harrison asked, as if reading my thoughts. "About Marin? No. She showed me who she really was, and I believed her." "I meant about leaving your old life behind. The simple shop, the quiet routine." I considered this. "Do you know what I regret? I regret waiting so long to believe in myself. I regret letting other people's opinions matter more than my own dreams." We pulled into our circular driveway, past the garden where Harrison had first told me he loved me. The house was lit up like a beacon, warm and welcoming. Inside, I made us tea while Harrison built a fire in the living room. We settled onto the couch with our cups, and I pulled out the latest franchise applications. 3 potential locations in Virginia, 2 in North Carolina. You know, Harrison said, watching me review the paperwork. When I first tasted your lemon bars at the wedding, I knew you were special, but I had no idea just how extraordinary you would become. I'm the same woman I always was. I just finally had someone who believed in me. No, that's not quite right. He set down his tea and turned to face me. You're the woman you always had the potential to be. I just provided the opportunity. You did all the hard work. As we sat there planning our next expansion, I thought about the different paths life could take. If I'd listened to Marin and Marcus, I'd be sitting in a small apartment somewhere, living on Social Security and wondering what might have been. Instead, I was building an empire. My phone rang, probably another reporter wanting an interview about the unlikely success story of Beulah's Sweet Corner. But when I looked at the caller ID, my breath caught. It wasn't a reporter. It was Patricia Hendricks, the town gossip who had started this whole chain of events by reporting my coffee date with Harrison to Marin. Hello, Patricia. Beulah, honey, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the Beulah's website. What can I do for you? Well, I'm calling because I have some news about Marin and Marcus. I almost hung up. Then curiosity got the better of me. What kind of news? They lost their house last month, had to file for bankruptcy. Marin's been telling everyone that if you'd just helped them instead of running off with your rich husband, none of this would have happened. I felt a pang of something, not quite sadness, not quite guilt. That's unfortunate. She's been bad-mouthing you all over town, saying you abandoned your family for money. But honey, everyone can see how successful you've become. That article in Southern Living? We're all so proud. After I hung up, Harrison looked at me questioningly. Marin and Marcus lost everything, I said. How do you feel about that? I thought about it honestly. Sad for the people they used to be, but not responsible for the choices they made. And if Marin called you directly? Asked for help? I met his eyes. I'd tell her the same thing she told me when I was struggling, that she's an adult and needs to figure it out herself. Harrison nodded approvingly. You've learned to protect your peace. As we prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 63, I looked happier and more confident than I had at 40. My hair was professionally styled, my skin glowed with good health and contentment, and my eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of someone who had built something meaningful. The woman looking back at me was someone Marin would never recognize. Successful, beloved, unshakable in her sense of self-worth. In the morning, I'd return to my thriving business, taste test new recipes with our head baker, and review plans for our cookbook deal with a major publisher. I'd have lunch with Harrison at our favorite restaurant, where the staff knew us by name and always saved our preferred table. But tonight, I'd simply be grateful. Grateful for second chances, for the courage to dream at 62, for a man who saw my potential when I couldn't see it myself. Most of all, I was grateful for the day Marin called me a family failure, because in trying to tear me down, she'd forced me to discover just how strong I really was. The last thing I did before turning off the light was check my phone one final time. 12 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably Marin using different phones to try to reach me. I turned the phone off and snuggled against Harrison's warm shoulder. Some doors, once closed, were meant to stay that way. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new reasons to be proud of the life I'd built. But tonight, I was simply a woman who had chosen herself over everyone else's expectations. And it felt like the sweetest victory of all. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.